Greetings, everyone, and thank you once again for stopping by the Infidel Guy audio show, brought to you by freespeech.org, the place where we examine religion, eradicate pseudoscience, and support our fellow freethinkers. This evening, I have a guest. His name is Dr. Tim Gorski. He's one of the co-founders of the Church of Freethought and pastor of the North Texas Church of Freethought. Dr. Gorski is better known to some of us as the editor and publisher of the Freethought Exchange and the editor and publisher of the Freethought Observer, which is no longer being published. He's a longtime member of the American Humanist Association, on the board of the Atheist Alliance, and a past member of the American Atheists, which I'm sure he has a great story he wants to tell us about that. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Thanks very much, Reginald. Glad to be here. I think what you're doing is absolutely terrific. We need to have much more talking amongst ourselves and community creating, because that's how we're going to get more recognition in the media and in society generally.
Well, I'm trying my best to do a little bit I can to assist. Well, your story. What began this journey, and how did the church begin? I guess those are two separate questions that are going to take probably 15 minutes to explain.
Right. Well, I can just kind of ramble on. I mean, I was raised, or was tried to be raised as a Catholic, and was an altar boy, and I never had any bad experience with the priests or anything of that sort that you read. And, really my experience in church was pretty positive for the most part, except that I just grew to not be able to accept all the supernaturalism. So I grew away from that, but I always did kind of have in the back of my mind that, gee, it was good to get together with other people that felt as you did and get a little charge of remembering during the week and the rest of the time to live a good life and get along with people, and sometimes you have to swallow your pride to get along, and we all know these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Go into the self-help section of any bookstore, and there's a lot of those kinds of materials, but, reading them on your own in private is just a little bit different than getting together with other people and discussing them and having it in kind of real time. So the idea of having a church without the superstition was kind of bobbing around in my mind for an awful long time. My wife had also thought it was something worth thinking about. We actually raised the subject with Paul Kurtz at a humanist meeting in Los Angeles years ago, and his reaction was not very positive. But she and I found friends here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area who liked the idea, and at one point we just said, well, what the heck, let's just do it. So we drew money out of our respective bank accounts and put it into a bank account that we opened called the North Texas Church of Freethought. And within a couple of months, we started newspaper ads and all. Within a couple of months, we had our first service. We've been at it every month since without fail. We've had child care and Sunday school. And as we attracted more and more people, individuals would come and say, hey, how about having this or that in the church? And we'd say, great, go ahead and do it. And that's how we've got all kinds of special interest group, gay, lesbian, teens. We've had the singles group, movie night. It's just everything that any other church is, except without the supernaturalism.
Well, exactly. How did you go about attracting members?
Well, we advertise in both the newspapers, Reginald. Here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there's a big newspaper in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Dallas, the Dallas Morning News. We actually have been advertising since day one in the religion section. And, of course, as you can imagine, this has been sort of a man bites dog story, so we've gotten media attention on a sporadic basis. And every time we've gotten it, good or bad, we've always attracted more members. And then it's been word of mouth and the internet, too, of course, for sure. We've attracted people who moved to the area that had known what we were doing for maybe a year or more, and when they move to the area, just by happenstance, they show up at church and they say, here I am, I'm glad to be here.
How helpful has the internet been to the church?
Well, my other co-founder, Mike Sullivan, who's the church's executive director, he says we couldn't have done it without the internet.
Wow.
I don't know that that's exactly true, but it probably is close, because that's the way you keep in touch when you're not actually in the face-to-face contact. It's a heck of a lot better way to keep up than to try to tag each other with telephone calls and these kinds of things. The biggest impact it's had, too, is for those of us with kids, and I've got 5, that they're really being raised with a sense of not being religious nothings. If you ask my kids, what are you, what's your religion, they'll say, I'm a freethinker. And it's amazing the kind of evangelism that they can accomplish at school with their peers. They don't take approaches like you or I might with this, oh, how do you know there's a God and things like that. They've got a much more subtle kind of approach, which is all their own, and they're sort of learning the ropes of how to get along in a world of believers. In fact, part of problem we've had is having to tell them that, look, all the Christians aren't these nasty people that scream at you that you're going to go to hell, because that's been their experience with some other Christians. So the church has been good that way, too, to help support the kids, give them a sense of not being freaks, that their parents are doing things that are not out of the ordinary. They meet a lot of other positive, upbeat, successful people who are not always griping about the other guy's religion, but rather exploring what it means to be a freethinker, to find rational ways of getting along with other people, being happy on the job, being happy doing the things that you have to do to be happy.
You know, Tim, when I received an email, I can't remember, from someone maybe 6 months ago or maybe to a year ago, and it was a poll asking how do they feel about Freethought congregation being called a church. And originally, I did have some problems with it myself, but then I began to think, well, what do churches do in the community? And I guess I'll let you take that over. Why a church?
Well, that's exactly right, and this is something we had to think about a long time ourselves, because we know that the words church and religion are kind of a put-off for people who've been, many of them, traumatized by church and religion. But, church just fits what we do so perfectly. If you had a group of people that were studying together, students, for example, you'd call that a fraternity if they lived in the same place and all. But what if one of them was a girl? Well, would it still be a fraternity? What if they went to different schools? What if a couple of them didn't go to school? You know what I'm saying is that you have to start trying to cut hairs here. And the fact of the matter is, if you have an organization of people that's held together by a common attitude about religious questions, not only theology, which in our case is essentially an atheology, but still the tools that we use to critique other people's theologies with which we're all familiar, those same tools are useful in making sense of all these other questions that we talk about: free will, life, love, death, families, marriages, all of these kinds of things. There is really arguably a whole religion that comes out of that. So if you have a community of people held together by those kinds of shared values and principles that meet regularly, that's open to the public, it's not arranged as some kind of pay your dues and vote for a president and this kind of thing, plus the fact that we don't just give over our meeting time to guests that we bring in. I had a lot of involvement previously with humanist and atheist groups, and a lot of times that's what they did. They have a meeting every month, and you never know what's going to be there because they always bring in some outside speaker, and, he just gets the podium. We don't do that. We preach our own message every month. We have music, we have humor, and then they have all these other activities besides. Gosh, there's just not really any word that you can apply to that fits as well as church.
Now, you mentioned music.
The Bible Belt.
Music?
Music?
Yeah, so what kind of music do you have in the Freethought Church?
We have a band, and they find all kinds of interesting things, sometimes related to theological things, and sometimes just ordinary songs that people have heard of. We had a church service centered around the idea of gratitude, exploring what it means to be grateful and to have others be grateful to you and so on. And they pulled up that old song, if you call, I'll be there, and it just fit great, this idea of having people to depend on that you can rely on.
Well, have you received a negative, as far as ratio is concerned, negative versus positive responses to the Church of Freethought? Well,
we get both, Reginald. The funny thing is, of course, a lot of atheists don't really quite understand what it is they're doing, what we're doing, been to our services, and so in their minds, we are what they imagine us to be, some sort of knockoff of a church that's telling people what to believe, that's enforcing conformity of thought, and so on. And, of course, that's not at all what we're about. The Christians, on the other hand, it's interesting because we basically get two types. So we were on one of the local talk show radios this past Sunday, and we had a lot of calls from Christians saying that they didn't agree with us, with our views, but that they thought it was fine for us to call ourselves a church, that they didn't want any government authority or anybody else telling us or anybody who could or could not be a church. And it was interesting because, of course, they were obviously seeing that if you had some authority set up to say who could use which words, you have a real problem. On the other hand, they did have a couple people call up and say that they were really upset with the idea that we were using the word church. But when the talk show host asked them, all right, why, they couldn't come up with any explanation. In fact, a couple of the Christians even came on after that and said that the etymology of the word church apparently comes from some Greek that means a calling out of people for a purpose, and we certainly are that. It's kind of like behind-the-lines guerrilla warfare for the people who are, the militant atheists. I really think if they looked at what we were doing that they should approve, because here we are, we're getting more exposure for atheists. It's positive. And we're using the believers' words, but in a way that the believers don't. That's got to undermine all of the things that they really don't like. That's not really our purpose in doing it, but that is the effect. I mean, think about it. If this sort of thing caught on many years down the road, you could conceivably have a situation where religion did not have the kind of connotations that it's had previously, just like the word sacrifice at one time probably could only mean blood sacrifice. And, of course, that's not what it means at all now. If you use the word sacrifice, nobody's going to say, oh, gee, you believe in killing animals, etc.
Well, I'm very curious about this. What are there any sermons? I would like to know what exactly, you mentioned many of the things you do, but I would like to know from beginning to end, if you could, what would a service be like? Right.
Well, in fact, we have some clips on our worldwide website, which is http://church.freethought.org. And there's some clips there that give an idea of what our church services are like, and we also post the kinds of subjects that we're going to handle. As I said, this past month we had a subject or theme of gratitude. And I'm just looking at the program that we had for that. First off, we had some music. We had some opening remarks, and I've been bringing in fact, that Sunday we had some discussion about some previous media coverage that we had. One of the local TV reporters in town did an item on us. And then for some reason, she brought in two Christians to just revile us. They didn't add to the discussion at all. They just said basically, those people are going to hell and how nervy it is of them to call themselves a church and so on. And this lady is generally a religion reporter, and if you look at all the other stories she doesn't bring in any kind of balance. She did a story on a 14-year-old, for example, who was a preacher over in Dallas, and she didn't bring in anybody who studied for years and years in divinity school to say, well, gee, I think maybe a 14-year-old's not mature enough, et cetera, to preach. So we generally have discussion of some of those things. And we had a humor item, which was the prayer for the unflinching agnostic. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I've not.
Probably was mined from the Internet. We have a lot of humor items, many of them developed in-house, sometimes skits, things of that sort. And then I've been giving a little series of talks on the religion of Freethought, and this one was on how to redraw the Cartesian divide, that we're used to thinking about mind and body being a divide, and I argued essentially that we ought to make the divide between objective and subjective. We had one of our members read a poem. He had recently acquired a girlfriend who is a believer, and he wrote a poem to her. In fact, she was in attendance also. Then I had an address, and I present original material pretty much every single service, and this was on this whole idea of gratitude. And we had more music, had some closing remarks, and we always do share with our members information about the financial condition of the church. We have always accounted for every penny since day one. This is not a money maker for us. Certainly, as I think I told you, it's been a money loser for me and the other founders. But we do finance ourselves entirely on the basis of donations, freely given, and we do point that out to invite people to give us what support they think it's worth. And then we have some additional songs, and then we bring in the kids. Because we have a Sunday school going on at the same time. We bring in the kids and their teacher to talk about what kinds of things they've learned that day. Kids recently have been working on circuit boards.
Circuit boards?
Circuit boards, figuring out how to wire a light bulb to light and things of that sort.
I can imagine some of my Christian listeners who are losing their minds right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're thinking, how boring could that be?
Well, it's very exciting for them because they get together these little electronic parts and they can make the little buzzers go and the lights light up if they get it right.
That's right.
So, really it's all free, too. You bring your kids in for a free science lesson. We have a science museum in town. It has a series of classes weekly during some portion of the year, and people wait outside in the cold for, an overnight period of time in order to get their kids signed up for that. So here it is for free for our members to have the kids instructed in this kind of thing, as well as addressing with the kids problems that they may have in school, dealing with believers who may be abusive, and generally just helping to remind the kids about how important it is to do the things that kids need to do, listen to their parents and control their anger, outbursts, and so on.
All secular things, of course, without the common sense type things. And
then we adjourn to a local eatery, which because of our numbers, we get free drinks. So that's always nice, too. And as I said, we have all these other activities over the course of the month as well with these different special interest groups that
Mm-hmm.
There's so many that are completely, I won't say out of our control, but they're not something we take any kind of close supervision of or anything like that. People are just doing their thing
mm-hmm.
under the aegis of the church.
Do you teach critical thinking skills? So not only figuring things out, but, do you have work on what's real, what isn't, and...
Oh, sure.
Really?
Yeah, of course, with the kids, we cover a lot of that. But, see, this is the interesting thing about our church service programs as
mm-hmm.
well, is to take a subject, even a divisive subject, potentially divisive subject like politics,
mm-hmm.
and just analyze it from the standpoint of its historical roots, its nature and different kinds of political systems. There's just an awful lot of things you can do with almost any subject. It does take a great deal of work to put these programs together, and it's really kind of a shame because we only present them once a month and then they're gone, although we post a lot of the material on our website eventually. But we are basically creating not a sacred scripture or something like that, but there's basically kind of a liturgy of all sorts of things we've talked about over the years, including what kind of faith a freethinker can have. I think that, of course, faith doesn't make much sense to us unbelievers, but I think that at the bottom of everything there is a faith that we're able to sort things out with the power of our own intellect.
That's right.
And that, if anything, is a faith, that is.
Mm-hmm. I think what I like to utilize when a Christian comes to me with that, I think there are two types of faith. I think maybe I was talking to Dan Barker about that, but I think maybe we can utilize the word faith too, but just not in the same context they use it.
Well, see, the interesting thing, of course, is that here in the West, we think of a lot of things that really are religious as philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
In the East, philosophy and religion are kind of conflated. So some of what we talk about and do might be construed as philosophy, but since it's addressed to the same kinds of things that in this country are commonly considered quote-unquote religious issues, I think that a very good case can be made that it is a religion. And when you take a social organization like we have that is exactly that of a church, it's pretty hard to say that we're not a church based on what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I think church really is just a unit of social organization between that of the family and the larger community, and I don't see any reason why atheists should be denied that kind of opportunity. I think we focus a lot on the first portion of the First Amendment's opening clauses, the Establishment Clause, but we have to remember that we are entitled to the Free Exercise Clause as well. And this is what I like to come back with a lot of times when people do say this, freedom of religion doesn't mean freedom from religion. And my answer is freedom of religion has to mean freedom from everybody else's religion.
I looked it up in a dictionary, and freedom, does mean to or from, away from, or something like that.
Right. Well, I think you have to be a little careful with the dictionary, of course, because dictionaries are just guides and they're not any kind of authoritative.
That's so true. As a matter of fact, I was using Webster's dictionaries. You mentioned earlier about one being able maybe to call what you do a religion. Right. Would you classify what you do as religious? Oh, sure. In fact, this little series that I've been giving now for a while, just short comments during each service, is on the religion of Freethought, ways in which we can be considered a religion. I don't think atheism is a religion. Atheism is just a lack of a belief. Theism is not really a religion either, of course, and a lot of different kinds of religions all incorporate theism. But I think the combination of our rational critique of supernatural claims combined with the same kind of analysis of all these other quote-unquote religious questions can be said to be a religion, and we call it Freethought simply because, of course, there's already this word out there that means forming your opinions without regard to tradition, authority, or established belief, and that just fits perfectly. We didn't have to make up a word or anything. Interesting. Normally there's one unified belief in a religion, and you have that. You're basically saying.
Right.
There's a unified belief. Okay.
Right. And although my kids are very good at explaining this, too, because people will ask them, what do you believe? And they'll say, well, our religion is not about believing. It's about thinking. Entirely true.
I see where you're coming from, and I see how that's a totally different perspective on things.
I mean, if you think about it, we all have beliefs, of course. Beliefs are very useful, but beliefs are kind of little stopping off places. They're static. They just kind of sit there. And when we're thinking, that's when we're sort of moving along the continuum. And we might or might not come back to the same belief that we had before, but at least we get some idea of the lay of the land, so to speak, what the context of this belief is. I think most of us unbelievers would agree that the most important thing about belief is not what belief you have, but why and how you hold that belief. True even of atheism. We have arguments about this, of course, in the unbelieving community as to what sort of atheism you ought to be, a strong or weak atheist, and so on and so forth.
How many members exactly do you have again?
We have about 400 families.
Great.
We have about 100 people showing up at any given month. We only meet once a month. We don't yet have our own building, but we do have a building fund. The question often comes up as to our tax status. Interestingly enough, if you read the tax code, the IRS's publication, we meet the criteria. Our beliefs and ideas are sincerely held. We're not in it for a tax dodge, and we meet regularly and provide these kinds of services. The state of Texas, interestingly enough, has ruled that you can't be a church unless you worship a supreme being. The Ethical Culture Society in Austin has already been litigating on this, and I don't know the outcome. I haven't heard that there is an outcome yet. You know how things go in legal, once you're into legal time. But if you think about it, that's going to open a tremendous can of worms. If the government can start saying you have to worship a supreme being, then the question comes up, well, what do you mean by worship? What do you mean by supreme? How supreme do you got to be? What's a being? Does he have to have a personality or somebody you can pray to, or can it be this?
That is so true.
You see what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah, the sun is the supreme being.
Right. Or what if, you put a picture of some cartoon character up on a wall and you spit on it and you say, well, we're worshiping our supreme being. That to us is worshiping the supreme being. I mean, you could really literally make a travesty of the state's effort to kind of standardize religion. So it's never going to stand up in the courts. But at this point, we don't own property, so it's not such a big deal. We would like to get the tax-exempt status just so we can be on an even standing with the other churches that, of course, do not have to pay sales taxes for their services and things that they buy.
Well, for our listeners who may be near your area, where exactly are you located?
Well, I live in Arlington, Texas, which is right between Dallas and Fort Worth. The next town over to the northeast is Irving, and Irving is where the hotel is at that we've been meeting every month since February of 1995.
Wow.
We have members coming from all over this region. We've had people drive a couple of hours from some of the small towns further out. So it's really been gratifying. We've really drawn a lot of people. As I said, we would really hope at some time in the near future, in the next few years, to be able to purchase a building or get some land on which we can place a building, because that would really help a lot, because then we could have services weekly. In fact, we could have the same service every week for a month for people that couldn't make the other ones, along with library and more opportunities for the kids. And, really this is how a lot of churches start. People meet in other people's living rooms, or they can meet in a hotel.
That's interesting.
And then they finally get their building. So we're on our way. It's not any kind of thing that we have to have. And I've been asked over the years, well, what do you think if this church doesn't work out? Suppose in 10 years it fizzles. Well, my answer to that is, so what? Great ride while it's going on right now. I'm having a great time. People are getting a lot of positive benefits out of it. And whatever happens in the future is whatever happened. That's
right. Yeah, I would love to see you definitely continue your work and the church grow. Speaking of the church growing, well, let me hold that thought. We are with, for those of you just coming in, we are with Dr. Tim Gorski, who's one of the co-founders of the Church of Freethought and pastor of the North Texas Church of Freethought. Well, Tim, how many other Freethought churches are in the U.S., or is there an affiliation or?
That's exactly right, Reginald. We've got an affiliate in Houston that began operation earlier this year, and also an affiliate in Northern California, which started a year and a half or 2 years ago. The only thing we ask of our affiliates is we ask them to sign a license agreement, which asks them to basically keep the supernaturalism out of things. You don't want some sort of snake handler coming in and taking over a Church of Freethought.
Right.
And we ask that they do as we have, which is to completely and openly disclose what their financial situation is.
Okay.
To be accountable. And other than that, we don't place any kind of requirements on people. We don't say that we have to have a pipeline into their bank account or anything like that. In fact, we want them to all be independent and see what kind of things they can do, and we can hopefully cross-fertilize each other and find out the kinds of things that work best. So it's really been pretty exciting. And as I said, the most exciting thing is just kind of seeing people all the time and the kids. We've married people. We've had naming ceremonies for members born into the church, literally freethinkers from day one. It's just been a tremendous kind of project. Lots of fun, too.
Well, what would you recommend to individuals who may want to start a...
Well, we have some documents that we'd like to send anybody. If they go to our website and email us, and, of course, anybody listening to this has got to have Internet access. So http://church.freethought.org, and we can supply them with materials that will give them an idea as to how to go about getting started. But I will just say that you can't do this on your own. I could never have done this on my own, and you need several people to kind of get going and provide the different kinds of services. And that's really what this kind of group is, too. It's not an activist group. You're not going to be filing lawsuits or having pickets and things like that, and you're not going to ask your members to do that. Essentially what you're doing is you're a service organization that's looking to supply or meet the needs of freethinkers in your area, to give them something positive and really give them something to come out of the closet for. That's really what we found, is the fact that here in this area we had the Metroplex Atheists, still have the Metroplex Atheists, which is what's left of an old Madeline Murray O'Hare cell or affiliate organization. And we were down to, half a dozen members or so. It was really kind of pitiful. We get together and gripe about, other people's religious ideas. When we started the church and started offering something positive and child care so that people didn't have to worry about getting babysitting and so on, we were pulling people in from all over. Even for some of the Unitarian churches, people that are at the Unitarian churches that are really kind of unhappy with the degree of supernaturalism that's tolerated at these kinds of churches. And I don't have any problem with that if the people there are happy, but if you're at a Unitarian church and you're having to listen to all this crystal power and so on and so forth, I think it would get a little grating.
Well, just like you have a few questions here in the chat room. Someone's asking, his name is Bain, he's asking, can you endorse a candidate, and what are your tax benefits, if any?
Well, as I said, our tax benefits are just that if anybody donates to us, they can certainly write it off against their federal income tax. We meet all the criteria for a religious organization, a church, in fact. So we've never had any problem with that. We're not owning any property now, so we don't really have to worry about the property tax. And as I indicated, we're kind of standing by to see what's going to happen with the struggle with the Texas State Comptroller as far as that goes. This has certainly not been a money-making opportunity for us, though, I can tell you that. So if we can get a tax break, it's only going to help us do more with what little we have. It's not going to make anybody rich. And then the other part of the question you said was what?
He mentioned, can you endorse a candidate?
Yes, the political involvement.
Yes.
We've made very careful arrangements from the very beginning not to get involved politically. We just kind of, for two reasons. Number one is we don't think churches ought to be involved in politics. We don't think believing churches ought to be involved, so why should we think that unbelieving churches should be involved? That's not a handicap, because anybody that wants to be politically active can go join a party or join some other group that's politically active. We don't need to do that. The other thing is that, of course, we have great respect for our members when it comes to their political thinking, and we certainly would not want to tell them how to vote or how to think politically. Great discussion, lots of opportunities for talking about what the differences are between political positions, but it's not anything that we get officially involved in. I'm
sure you've heard here in Georgia that you have a lot of Baptist ministers here actually trying to persuade their congregation to vote for certain people.
Yes, well, we know that that's been going on for a long time with believing churches probably all over the country. And it's difficult to say, just classify them all. I'm sure there are believing churches that really don't want to get into that either, but the ones that have been very prominently in the news and obviously in ways that are very distressing to those of us who don't think that the state and the church ought to be commingled.
You mentioned here you're a past member of the American Atheists, and you were personally excommunicated by Madeline Murray O'Hare. Tell us about that.
Well, I think a lot of people that were an American Atheists crossed horns with Madeline Murray O'Hare and got excommunicated. So having met a number of people who were personally booted off by her, I guess, and I have such respect for them, too, that I have to kind of be proud of that. I'm sorry to see what happened to Madeline Murray O'Hare. I think it's absolutely terrible what happened to her family. And, I think it's really debatable as to whether Madeline Murray O'Hare helped or hurt. I know that there's opinions all around on that. But I think that we're at the point now where America's ready for not really, I should say, a kinder, gentler atheist, but a kind of atheism that distinguishes more sharply between what are legitimate religious questions and ways to answer those questions versus supernaturalism. If I was to make a slogan like President Clinton's, it's the economy, stupid, it would be, it's the superstition, stupid. that's really what we're against, and all of these other kinds of things should not bother us so much. By the way, if anybody lives in an area where they know that they can get a discount for a church bulletin, if they log onto our website, they can download and print out one of our church bulletins, and that's a great way to evangelize for atheism too.
And what was the web address again? I'm typing it in.
It's http://church.freethought.org.
Okay, that's great.
There's a ton of material on there, and we hope to have an upgrade or revamp of our website working soon. We're working on the organization of it. We'll have a lot more things than we have currently.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of things in our archives. If you go to the archives section, there's a lot of things there that are material that were presented in previous services, sermons, and so on. And by the way, you mentioned that word too. I've always created some, kind of original material, just food for thought, because I enjoy it and because it's appreciated. And I get some good positive feedback on that, and it's just been called sermon. So I didn't see the reason for coming up with some sort of new word to describe it. So that's what it's gone by. I want to point out something else too,
Sure.
and that is that although I certainly don't look at my role as a quote-unquote pastor of the church to be some kind of role of authority the way a bishop or a priest in the Catholic Church might, there are some definite things that I can do for people that you can't do if you're the president of an atheist club. Obviously, marrying, helping people to celebrate their marriages.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing is that, if you get in trouble with the law or somebody sues you, and you go talk to a friend, you talk to your president of the Audubon Society or some other group you're in.
Okay.
They can subpoena that person and get all that material, whatever you said to them, out in court. If somebody in my church is being sued and they've got some angst about it and they just want to talk,
mm-hmm.
anything they tell me is not something that the attorneys can get out of me in court because of the church.
Mm-hmm. Confiding in a religious...
Exactly. And I
Wow.
think that's basically a safety valve for people that get into these kinds of situations. Why should they have to go hire a psychiatrist to get that kind of privilege?
Right. Well, also, let's see here. I see something else here. You mentioned also you're active in countering false and questionable medical claims. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, Reginald, I'm a physician. I practice obstetrics and gynecology in the area here.
Okay.
And I've long had an interest in kind of aberrant medical kinds of things. So that has generally meant exposing some of the falsehoods involved in what's known as alternative medicine, which has really become big in these last few years. It's really amazing because there's definitely a religious connection to most of the kinds of alternative medicines that are being pushed out there. Acupuncture, for example, has roots in astrology.
Mm-hmm.
Homeopathy has roots in invisible energies that are imparted to water when you dilute these substances and so on.
Okay.
It's really kind of interesting, and of course, just like with these religious doctrines, which is what many of them amount to, they're kind of wonderful object lessons in how to go wrong in your thinking process.
Hmm. Have you seen firsthand how the pseudoscience can have affected people? Or?
Oh, sure. Reginald, I've had calls over the years from people, mainly on these nutritional supplements, because they get advertised as all safe and all natural. Boy, there's a religious belief for you that if it's natural, it's safe.
Right. Like, well, cocaine's opium's
That's
natural.
a good example. In fact, when I give talks to other doctors on herbal remedies, that's one of the things I do is put up a slide of Erythroxylum coca, which is the coca plant, and point out that this is an all-natural herbal remedy used for thousands of years or however long it's been used by the Andean Indians and so forth. And as we all know, once you purify it. Same thing with tobacco, of course. Here's tobacco, this wonderful herb, all natural. And we know that does an awful lot of damage to people. So there's all kinds of ways to fight pseudoscience and falsehoods in our society, and I think wherever you're at, that there is that opportunity. And I've definitely felt an obligation to do what I could, where I could, on behalf of reason and facts.
Once again, everyone, for the listeners just coming in, we are with Dr. Tim Gorski. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Perfect.
And he is one of the co-founders of the Church of Freethought and pastor of the North Texas Church of Freethought. By the way, Tim, some individuals are telling me that your site is down right now.
Our site is down?
The site is down, and I tried to go myself yesterday, and it was down. I thought it may have been. I have not checked today.
Well, of course, I'm very disappointed, but try again tomorrow, I would say. All the material should still be there. the Houston Church of Freethought and the Northern California Church of Freethought have sites that are linked to ours as well. I'm not sure how much material they have up on theirs because I haven't looked at them recently.
Okay.
But, it's really kind of something to think about that maybe we're getting to the point where we can stop railing against all the other religions and think about what we have to offer in their stead. I think if we look into the far future and ask ourselves what kind of world do we want a world where people are concerned about all the kinds of things that religions are concerned about. We just don't want all that supernaturalism. So the question is, how are we going to make that transition? And at least my answer is, well, let's organize the way the churches do, not because they're churches, but because, gosh, this is a successful model. This is a successful way to do it. It's proven. You get together a bunch of people that you invite for free. You provide for their needs, and you ask for compensation. And it's, as I say, not a way to get rich, but you certainly can carry on. And you get an awful lot of people that are very appreciative and are willing to show it.
Well, yes, Tim, I know firsthand how it is to be actually taking a loss, but continuing to do something that you think is beneficial.
Right.
In the free thought arena. Well, you're getting some responses here. Someone has made a comment that isn't what you're doing a bit ironic, and how do you feel about, well, Webster's dictionary, in his definition of church, has included the word Christian. So let's just hit the first one. How do you feel about individuals who approach you and say that what you're doing is a bit oxymoronic or ironic?
Right. Well, as I said, we're basically talking about a unit of social organization. We're not talking about a theology. If you just kind of go out in the community and see what people are doing, rarely are people going from church to church shopping for a particular theology. People tend to go where their neighbors go, where the amenities are suitable, where they have Mother's Day out, things of these kinds. And so church really is getting a lot more emphasis in terms of its kind of appeal. Look at these mega churches where they have shows and music. It's basically an entertainment medium, and then with the other things that go along with it. The other thing, as I said earlier, is that even the Christians, a lot of them don't seem to begrudge us the use of this word church. And gosh, what other word would we use? And a lot of times I use this analogy too, as I say, well, all right, suppose you had somebody who was dressed in chaps and spurs and a Stetson hat, and they were herding cattle mounted on a zebra. Would you refuse to call that person a cowboy because they were riding on a zebra instead of a horse? I mean, when you have something come along that's maybe not quite like everything else, you've got to pick something to describe it. You can either make up some word, and here's Paul Kurtz with this great word, eupraxiphy, but how many people can say it?
I'm sorry?
Right. Eupraxiphy, that's
spell that
word for a secular kind of religion equivalent. So you've got to call it something. And church. And
how is that spelled for the listeners? How is that spelled?
Eupraxiphy?
Yes.
EUPRAXOPHY.
PHY.
I think that's why eupraxiphy. It's a synthesis of EU meaning good, praxis, which is practice or action, and OP, wisdom, philosophy.
Wow, interesting.
but like I say, who can say it? It's how far is it going to go? Church is a nice, comfortable word. People know what it means, and really, as I say, it's kind of like that word sacrifice. In my heart of hearts, I'm thinking to myself, if the idea of church not revolving around theology were ever to catch on widely, that's one way that theology would eventually wither away. And you have people even in the believing churches arguing that theology, at least the way it's been traditionally understood, should be done away with. There's a book by Bishop Spong, S-P-O-N-G, who's an Episcopalian. It's called Why Christianity Must Change or Die.
Yes.
You see, and he's making a similar argument that these kinds of theological propositions are useful for their symbolic or poetic kinds of uses. And, certainly we can look at those kinds of things as that. We have in our church, in fact, addressed the whole subject of creativity. One of the things that some of our members like to remind us of is, just as Clarence Darrow said that he didn't believe in God because he didn't believe in Mother Goose, I think we can say that we believe in God in the same way that we believe in Mother Goose. So, and in fact, I've also heard it argued that maybe this is how the Boy Scouts should be neutralized too, that go ahead and take their oath, I promise to do my duty to God. Of course, to me, God is like Paul Bunyan or Mickey Mouse, so my duty to him doesn't amount to a whole lot. This would actually have the advantage also if the Boy Scouts got into had the idea that this was being done, that they would have to really engage in much more pointed religious testing of youth, which would be even less likely to go over well in a public relations sense.
So it's time for both sides, well, excuse me, the many sides to change. We just can't continue to
right.
do the same things over and over again. It's time for everyone to try to meet, do some changing in their practices in order to create improvements, in order to move toward improvement. That's what it sounds like you all are trying to do. Do you believe that what you're doing is the only philosophy or one of the best philosophies involved in trying to spread reason and free thinking?
Well, of course, we think it's best for us.
Okay.
And what you said is just exactly right. There's been a cultural war declared against us. And there are people who would really like to stamp out all vestiges of secularism. I don't think they're going to be successful. But in this war that's been declared against us, there are going to be many different battles, many different armies, and there are going to be people doing different things. You certainly would not have in a full-fledged actual military kind of situation one service, the Air Force, saying that the Navy was no good, or the Army saying that the Air Force was no good, or that the people behind the lines in the underground were no good. I mean, everybody's doing their part. Everybody's doing what they feel comfortable doing. This is all an all-volunteer effort. Of course, it's not like in the military where people are all paid. But I think all of the atheist and unbelieving organizations are doing their part. I wouldn't do their parts just the way that they're doing them, but then it's not up to me to do those things. So we all need to do what we can do, where we can do it, and hope for the best. That's what forging the future is about. That's the one thing they can't take away from us, Reginald, is the future.
That is so true. Another question here. Do you, or the Church of Freethought, well, especially North Texas, right? That's where you are.
Right.
Do you have any yearly observations or events, like winter solstice celebrations or summer solstice, or?
All of those things are great excuses for a party. You know that, Reginald? But, yes, in fact, that's one thing that comes up around this time of year every year, and that is that, if you don't deliberately set aside some time to remember family, send people cards or get in touch and set up some meetings and family get-togethers and so on, well, then when are you going to do it? I don't really look on these things as being anything sacred other than just that in the rush of time in our present world, if you don't set aside time to do some of these kinds of things, then it's unlikely to ever get done. And I think in that sense, there's a quote-unquote religious value to it, because we can all go to work and come home and sleep and go through all the motions every day forever if we don't have these other things to interrupt our lives. So, yes, we certainly do observe the winter solstice, because everybody else does. It's a popular time of year. And we generally have equinox parties and summer solstice as well. And, of course, the other thing is Freethought Day. Do you know about Freethought Day?
No.
Yeah, in October 12th, 1692, Governor William Phipps of Massachusetts issued an edict that barred spectral evidence from the courtroom. And that's what put a stop to the Salem witch trials. I have long thought that this was a valuable day to celebrate. It was not something that I thought of. I'd have to go back in my files and get your names to give proper credit. But there have been a number of people around the country, Margaret Downey, Catherine Farringer down in San Antonio, who have done some work trying to get this recognized with variable success, I suppose. But they have, people have gotten governors and mayors to issue proclamations, for example. But the thing that's so significant about this is that it's not a kind of a saint day like the Catholics might have. Governor William Phipps was not one of us. This is not marking some kind of scientific advance. It's not a Darwin Day or something like that. Instead, it's something much more important, and that is probably the most explicit recognition that our system of law, which is to say dealing with each other, depends on getting away from superstition. In other words, Governor William Phipps issued this edict not because he was a freethinker or because he suddenly decided he wasn't going to believe in the supernatural anymore, but because he saw this is the only way to put a stop to this terrible tragedy in Salem. And indeed, we face that same kind of situation today. Here's the kid up in Oklahoma who's being in trouble because of supposedly hexing her teacher.
Right.
About this story, right?
That's right. I've heard that.
But you just can't have those kinds of things cutting into public discourse, or certainly not into a court of law.
That's something you would dream about. I just couldn't believe it when I heard it.
Right.
I thought it had to be an urban myth or something. I couldn't believe it.
Right. But you have the same kinds of things going on elsewhere in our society. We mentioned the alternative medicine before. There's something that people do call therapeutic touch. which is not actually touch. They just kind of reach around you and smooth out this energy field that they claim that you have. Of course, it's invisible, and they can tell where it's at, except for the 9-year-old who proved in the Journal of the American Medical Association that they couldn't feel it. But my gosh, if people had energy fields sticking out of them, and if they could be affected by people moving against it, then, gosh, somebody bumping up against you in the subway could give you cancer by disturbing your human energy field.
With his negative energy.
Right, exactly. So again, these are all the same tools of critical analysis that are useful so many other places. We ought to apply them everywhere. And when we apply them to religious questions, then you get a religion. It's an atheological religion. It's not a supernatural religion, but it certainly addresses all the important religious, quote-unquote, religious questions in a way that we unbelievers can stomach. Now, there's going to be a lot of variation from person to person. This is not going to be a doctrinal religion because, a lot of the information that I have to put together what I think is best about how to relate to other people and live my life is not information that you're privy to. This is why I said earlier that I'm kind of a Cartesian, but I don't draw the line between the mind and the body, but between the subjective and the objective.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we have to agree to disagree, it's typically because there's some information that we're not able to get across that divide. Your experiences are different than my experiences.
Once again, we are with Dr. Tim Gorski, for some of you just coming in. He is the co-founder of the Church of Freethought and pastor of the North Texas Church of Freethought. Well, Tim, I'd like to know a little bit about your upbringing. As far as religion is concerned, what were your parents? Were one of them religious, both religious, non-religious, in your environment and how it formed you? I would like to know a little bit more about your transition from...
I would say my dad was fairly religious in that he went to church every Sunday. He was a Catholic, and of course in that religion, if you don't go to church, it's a mortal sin, and you're going to go to hell. But that really wasn't anything that made me very pleased. In fact, I really didn't like to go to church when I was a kid. It's been a real eye-opener for me now, in fact, with our church here, that my kids will come and say, gee, is this church day? Can we go? And they're excited. They want to go because they have fun. But although I didn't enjoy church very much, it was more fun when I got to be an altar boy because then you get to do things and you get to socialize with the priests. And we got to go up to their cabin in the woods in Wisconsin where we were not molested. In fact, I was pretty impressed at that time what a bunch of goof-offs these guys were, because we'd go out in the rowboat and they'd light up M80s and throw them into the lake and make them go boom and so on. So I think it's not the case that I had any kind of bad associations with with the church, other than that it was boring and it just was not any kind of thing that I could accept after a while as far as the theology goes.
So if anyone is using that excuse for the reason why he is now a non-believer, you can throw that out the window.
What's that? That I'm angry at God? No, not at all. But, these are the kind of misconceptions that we're up against. Sharing our stories is helpful in these kinds of contexts, because this is the same thing I find with most other unbelievers. It's not that they fell out of belief because of some bad experience they have, or that God didn't help them when they needed or wanted it. It's just that they couldn't abide the nonsense. They just couldn't make sense of it, and there's just a certain kind of mind that can't turn away from that. It's like picking at a scab. You just have to keep going at it, and when there's nothing there, well, you're not going to keep deluding and fooling yourself. I was interested in science from an early age, had a great time with chemistry sets and things of that kind. I had 4 brothers, had plenty of playmates. My dad was not weak or mean or authoritarian. I guess I just don't really fit the mold that the theists would like to put us in as far as being an atheist. Really was just probably the same process by which you and a lot of other people came to it.
Right. I know that personally most theists, especially Christian theists, perceive almost all atheists as the angry atheists.
Right.
All the time. Well, you have a question from Fran, and we have 10 more minutes left in the show. I hope that we can squeeze in a few more questions here. Fran asks, does your church have emotionalism that would equate with the typical atmosphere of the Christian churches?
Well, that's a good question. Some churches, I guess, get really into the hand-clapping, foot-stomping kind of thing. I don't think we've ever really been like that. We've had some just rolling in the aisle, splitting your sides, laughing type humor pieces. I did an adaptation of the old, the Abbott and Costello, Who's on First?
Yes.
I did an adaptation of that as to, who's the one true God. And, of course, it goes on for quite a while, and we just, really had people in stitches with that. I think our goal with our services is to probably provoke a little bit of emotion from people to get them thinking about some of the kinds of things that are, really most important in their lives. I think that, this is the trouble with a lot of us, is sometimes we just get to be too cerebral, which makes us too cynical and too analytical from the standpoint of picking everything apart. And sometimes we have to back up and be a little ambiguous, because those are the kinds of things that sometimes are more fruitful in the way of finding something to apply in your life. Because, of course, life is so unpredictable. You're just not able to stop and think and make a decision every time, and sometimes you have to sort of, quote unquote, go with your gut. So, yes, I would say that we do try to help each other, I should say, condition our gut, so to speak, towards a greater level of charity, forbearance, not engaging the kinds of behaviors and habits of thinking that are likely to make us miserable, instead to try to do the kinds of things that are likely to make us happy.
Well, I'm really glad I've had you on the show this evening. I've learned a lot about the Church of Freethought and dispelled any remaining myths that may have been in my mind concerning the church.
Well, let me just add, too, that, as I said, even some of the people who ought to be on our side just have misconceptions about what this is about. It's not about conformity of belief. It's not about leading people around by the nose. If you've ever been to one of these atheist conventions where they get people that get up and speak, really kind of what we try to do with each one of our services is to have a kind of a little mini symposium or Saturday Night Live of Freethought with, of course, music, humor, something to think about. We don't really spend a whole lot of time critiquing other people's religions unless it has to do with some subject that we're talking about. And that's very rewarding. And anybody who has never been to one of our church services that could get to one of them, I would urge them to attend. And anybody who's interested in starting this kind of thing in their area, as I said, we can supply them with information, but you do need to have other people who will help you get this kind of thing going and sustain it.
And since your website is down right now, could you provide the listeners with a way to contact you and or maybe even an address in which they can write to you or something of that nature?
Sure. Well, in fact, on the website, of course, you just email us at church@freethought.org. Or you can email me personally if you want. It's my email address is drg, D-O-C-T-O-R-G, @writeme.com, WRITEME.com. Okay.
You can say it one more time, please. Your email address?
Well, the email address for the church is church@freethought.org.
Okay. Church@freethought.org, okay.
And my personal email address is drg, D-O-C-T-O-R-G, @writeme, all one word, writeme.com. And by the way, if there's parents out there or youngsters, we have a teen group on our e-groups page. We hope after the revamp and upgrade of our website to have much more material there for youngsters. We have Freethought nursery rhymes. My wife, Deborah, has been running the youth services and I'm overseeing the Sunday school aspect of our operations and currently being helped with one of our members.
Okay.
Since its inception. So we have a lot of material and things that we can offer there as well. So if anybody wants to talk to somebody who can help with that, and I think she qualifies as an expert. She's a mother of 5 little freethinker kids, currently now in age from 3.5 to 10. So she's got a lot of experience and things to share too.
Okay. Well, before I let you go, how many people will be needed to actually set up a church?
Well, there were 4 of us to begin with.
Okay.
And we didn't really plan it that way, but we each kind of gravitated towards what we were most comfortable with. Mike Sullivan, who's our executive director, is just a super organizational person, upbeat. If you're feeling down about how things might be going, I just, would recommend getting around Mike because he'll set you straight. He's got just a super-duper attitude, and he's just been terrific as far as the organization of the church has gone, keeping track of our mailing lists and getting everything done as far as the bulletin out and all of these kinds of things. Just it would be impossible without him. I have kind of gravitated into making sure that all the service material was there so that I've got all the programs set up, the didactic and humor and all of these kinds of things. And also because being a physician and having some comfort with counseling and that sort of thing, I've definitely tried to make myself approachable for any of our members who wanted to discuss anything that mattered to them. And I've also helped some of the other members to spearhead, in fact, a project where we would try to get out to some of the hospices and get involved in some of the area medical facilities that are involved with end-of-life issues.
Okay.
And that we've already been included with one of the major public hospitals in the area. And that's a form of evangelism too. An activist might say, "Oh, gee, look at all that great PR you're getting," but it is that. But on the other hand, we're also meeting the needs of unbelievers, and that's the thing that's important.
That's great. Well, once again, everyone, we were with Dr. Tim Gorski, who is co-founder of the church Freethought and pastor of the North Texas Church of Freethought. And if you missed the live show, the archive show will be up in approximately 25 minutes. Anything else?
Reginald, it's just been a real pleasure talking to you. I think what you're doing is super duper fantastic. Hope I get out there to meet you sometime in the flesh instead of the cyberspace.
I would like that
version. If you ever do get out here, it's the first Sunday of each month that we meet at the Wilson World Hotel, which is right near the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport.
Okay.
And, of course, we're accessible on the web. We'd love to get feedback from anybody. We are compiling some frequently asked questions that will be part of our new website. So if you have any questions that you didn't get to ask Reginald tonight or through the program, or if you're listening at an archive show, just email us at those addresses we gave, and we'll be glad to include those.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to put you on hold here, and I'll close out. Thank you. Well, everyone, thank you very much for tuning in to the Infidel Guy Real Audio Show. Once again, if you have any questions that you want to ask me, or if you want to support the show, or if you even have any guests in mind that you would like for me to interview, well, someone mentioned George Carlin. I don't know if I can do that, but we'll see what can happen. Who knows? Email me at infidelguy@aol.com. Once again, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you tomorrow. We have a great guest coming tomorrow, Mackay White, with Campus Freethought. So I will talk to you all tomorrow. Thank you very much. Good night.
And for those who decided to hang out a little bit longer, hello, it is I, the Infidel Guy, Dr. Reginald Finley. It's funny, I mentioned Mackay is actually Micah, and he has a PhD now. I'm thinking about perhaps having some kind of short Where Are They Now segments, about 10, 15 minutes long, where I kind of follow up with some of the guests that we had on a program over a score ago, and just see what are they doing now, if they're still around, and kind of see what they remember about the program as well, and also see what's changed in their lives. Maybe they have a different philosophy now. So it'd be really good to kind of follow up with some of these folks. And for those who are new to my program, thank you for tuning in. And if you listen to the end, wow, kudos. And if you're feeling a little bit lonely out there, there are plenty of organizations out there as well. Make sure that you can just Google them now. When we first started, we had to use the white pages. I'm just kidding. Internet was around at the time, obviously, but there were hardly any that were as well known as some of them are today. And I remember feeling like I was the only person that had my particular philosophy about, theology and science, and I felt really alone. And if it wasn't for the internet and me meeting with other free thinkers who thought similarly, obviously I never would have started my radio program, and who knows what my thinking would be like today. I really don't know. But anyway, thank you, everybody. I just thought I'd just jump on here real quick and say I appreciate it. And it's given me some ideas, again, about those follow-up shows. So stay tuned to that, and I'll start working on that. See you next time.